Namaskaram, good evening to all of you. So let us start the program by felicitating the guest of this evening, Mr. Ohad Ouziel. And also we have with us Madam Avital Barak, who is a senior cultural officer from Embassy of Israel. Mr. Ohad Ouziel, a well-known Israeli writer, editor and translator. All the writers who are assembled here and friends. I am glad to welcome all of you for this literary forum that will witness a brief talk by Mr. Ohad Ouziel, followed by the interaction between the writers who are here today. Distinguished Israeli thinker, writer and intellectual Amos Oz wrote once, "The best way to know the soul of another country is to read its literature." But why should one read literature of other cultures? It is from the interaction of and exchange between two cultures that new knowledge emerges. It has always been the case throughout the history of humanity and across civilizations. Oz talked about knowledge one can gain from another country by reading the literature of the country. When it comes to India, we have hundreds of languages and hundreds of cultures, practices, customs, mores, religions and philosophies. So, when Sahitya Akademi, India's premier literary institution, arranges writers' meets at regional, zonal and national levels, or meet the author with an eminent writer or a poet from one language, it is to enable writers and scholars from other languages to know more about the cultural, linguistic and literary traditions from which the said author hails. This widens the horizon of the writer, scholar, who inquires into the culture of the author. It is with the same spirit that Sahitya Akademi organizes writers' meets under cultural exchange programs or when an individual foreign writer or scholar visits India. Hebrew or Yiddish literature is one of the ancient in the world. Through ages, that literary tradition has proved us with many literary gems. In the 20th century also, we can see the tradition flourishing in Israel. Distinguished writers and scholars like Amos Oz, David Grossman, Edgar Keret, Abraham Gabriel Buli Eshohawa, and many others have enthralled the readers worldwide. I just mentioned only a handful of names for the want of time. Over the past few years, we have organized readings and interactions by the Israeli writers and scholars in association with the Hebrew Writers Association and cultural exchange programs, and also sent Indian writers delegation to Israel as part of the same program. And also we have received a wonderful writers delegation from Israel in India during our Festival of Letters few years ago. It is my belief that more such interactions between writers and scholars from Israel and India take place, richer will be the literary traditions and knowledge systems of both the countries be. Mr. Ohad Ouziel is the author of Tel Aviv, Heaven, Hell, and 100 Hidden Truths of Parenting. He has also translated politically correct bedtime stories by James Finn Garner, eminent American writer and satirist, into Hebrew. He is the reputed editor associated with Salonet, the online literary salon, and Nakun, that is a journal of Ethiopian and dystopian literature. And Mr. Ohad Ouziel is also an active member of the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel. Rather, his whole family is associated with that Israel Writers Association. His father was very active member. Rather, he is looking after that Hebrew Writers Association. And it is our pleasure to host Mr. Ohad Ouziel today. And I sincerely hope everyone who is participating in this literary forum stands benefited. With these few words, I am glad to welcome all of you once again for this literary forum. That is basically an interaction between Mr. Ohad Ouziel and these Delhi-based writers who are assembled here. And also we are fortunate to have with us in our Miss Avital Barak, who is a senior cultural officer from Embassy of Israel. Welcome to Sahitya. So now, over to you.
So before I begin my part, I want to present to you this letter from the Hebrew Writers. So this is the letter from the Hebrew Writers Association chairman, Mr. Tzvi Kanir, that he sent to you. And this is the present. So this is a Hebrew version of a very famous sculpture by an American sculptor called Indiana. He wrote love. It's 4 letters in English, L-O-V-E, and it's 4 letters in Hebrew, Ahava. So this is love. And I think it comes with love from
Thank you.
From everybody in Israel.
Thank you. Now over to Mr. Ohad Ouziel. You can read excerpts from your writings, or you can say about your literature or your contributions to your literature or Hebrew literature.
So,
anything, it is open.
Yeah, I'll introduce myself, I think, maybe, and then we can have a conversation and see where it goes. So, I write mostly in Hebrew, although the first book that you mentioned, 100 Hidden Truths of Parenting, it's not a literary work, it's a book of humor, and I wrote that one in English. It was written in English to begin with. Actually, it was translated to Hebrew, but not by me, by someone else. So most of my creation is in Hebrew. I wrote the novel, and then since then I've been more active in short stories, and in 2 platforms that I think are interesting for short stories. One is a traditional literary magazine. It comes out in print twice a year. We do lecture, we read all the stories that are submitted and poems. We select the ones that we think are good. We do some editing. Very traditional literary magazine. But the topic is not traditional. It is entirely dedicated to the 2 extremes of the vision of the future. The dystopian one, where the future is horrible, and the utopian one, where the future is wonderful. Because, and this is not my thought, but it's the thought of the editor, the chief editor of that magazine, the future is the most important thing that literature, it's the most important thing that literature can do, is predict the future. Because scientists and technicians and engineers, they think about the machines of the future. But the humans of the future, this is our role as literary writers, to imagine. And I think to a certain extent, and I fight with him on this a little bit from time to time, even when you write a story about the past, you are writing about the future, because you are imagining the human condition. And the other is more future. It is online. It is in the internet. It's a literary magazine like others. Again, selection process, not everything gets published, but it's easier to publish online, and it's a livelier platform. The discussion can happen on its pages. And so these are the 2 other literary endeavors that I'm involved with, besides actually writing, which is an important part of everything. So I think that's a good introduction. And I would love to hear what everybody else here is doing and thinking.
Well, very warm welcome to India, and particularly, I think humor seems to be your main subject of writing. So, humor has also been traditionally part of Indian writing in Sanskrit. We have a number of poems and prose writing in Sanskrit, which is where humor is the key element. Probably you will get a chance to read some of these stories, and I wondered if there has been some translation from Sanskrit into Hebrew, or maybe there's a possibility to do it maybe through English.
I'm going to butcher it because I don't know how to say it, the Bhagavad Gita?
Bhagavad
Gita. So that was, I think, translated, I think, even from the original Sanskrit by academics. So it's not a literary translation, it's an academic translation. But that, I think, was translated, and probably some more that I'm not aware of. But
what I'm saying that Bhagavad Gita is not a text of humor. I'm saying that maybe, you have done some translations from English into Hebrew of the, politically correct bedtime stories. So maybe, if you look at some Sanskrit texts, India's classical literature, which are mainly focused on humor. They are humorous Sanskrit texts. And it would be good to have some translation from Sanskrit into Hebrew. I think that would be literary bridges between two ancient languages.
That would be amazing. I will give one word of warning. Specifically when you humor, we talked about it in the conversation before. When you translate Umberto Eco, he famously said in Italian, dire quasi lo stessa cosa. It means saying almost the same thing. So when you translate, it's never exact. It's always like almost. And when you translate humor, it gets worse, because sometimes you have to rewrite the joke. You have to understand what the joke meant in the original, but because of cultural references and everything, you have to write a new joke in the new language that is completely different, but says the same thing. So for humor, it's even more tricky, but it's a welcome challenge. I would be interested to try at least.
Any more things that you would like to ask? Yeah, please. You can tell your name and just briefly introduce yourself also.
I'm Ohad Ouziel. I write in English and Hindi. My poems have been published on the situation in Middle East and Iran and Israel also in most of the US magazines. You are associated with, you are a writer and associated with the Hebrew Writers Association. So I would like to ask something about the future of literature and future of Middle East, Israel in this chaotic time. And besides survival and revival trends, what are the main trends in Hebrew literature? Not only in Israel, but entire Hebrew diaspora. So, would you like to put some light on this?
Yes, I'll tell you what I know. I'm not an expert on. Most of the Hebrew Writers Association in Israel is named like that because when it was founded, most of the Hebrew writers were not in Israel. Most of them were in the diaspora. Since then, a lot has changed. And today, the bulk, I would say 90-95% of Hebrew creation happens in Israel. Not all of it. There are a group of Israelis I know that live in Berlin, in Germany, and they created like this little colony, and they write and publish in Hebrew from Germany. I know there's maybe something a little similar in the US, sometimes, yes. But most of the creation of Hebrew happens in Israel, and most of it, even with people who go outside Israel to write their stories, they aim it at the Israeli public, at the Israeli reader, because the reader of Hebrew is mostly in Israel. But it's an interesting dynamic. The foundation of the Hebrew Writers Association of Israel is tied to the revival of the Hebrew language. But thankfully, after more or less 100 years, it started in the late 19th century, almost 150 years. Hebrew is alive and kicking and flourishing. There's a lot of creation in Hebrew. And I think the hallmark of a healthy literary community is that if you have really bad literature. If there's a lot of bad literature, it means that there's a lot of good literature. If there's just a lot is being created. It's not just some elite that creates only the finer stuff. So there's a lot of pulp, there's a lot of humor. I like writing humor, but it's not sometimes considered the most serious. There's popular poetry and there's more artistic poetry. So everything that you can find in a vibrant literary society, you find in Hebrew. One thing that makes it easier for Hebrew writers is that we are less threatened by AI because we have a language that AI is not so good at. But I'm an optimistic person, and I also believe, we had this conversation also before, I also believe that AI will become a tool for writers. No, it will not replace it. It will just be a tool that we use, like we use word processor. I remember when I was very young, I had to copy drafts by hand. I had first draft, not when I was a writer, but when I was a kid. I had the first draft, I would write it, then I have to do a clean copy. And writers used to write massive works of literature with copying by hand. Then we have word processors. We cut, we copy, we paste. We got used to it. It made literature, I don't know if better, but it made its way into the toolkit of the literary writer. And I think the same will happen with AI. So in that sense, I hope it answers your question. Sure. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Rajkumar Gautam and I write in Hindi. I want to just ask for my information that in your country, what is the form of literature, that is fiction or poetry, is most popular in the readers?
In the prose. Prose is by far the most popular right now, a lot more than poetry. It comes and goes. And we have a couple of pretty popular poems right now that people are reading. Chorev, and I can't remember the name of the second one, I'm sorry. So it does exist. Poetry is alive and kicking and well, but still prose is the most more prominent one right now. I can tell you that in the history of the Zionist movement, poets played a really important role in the revival of the language and also in the sort of harnessing the emotional connection to the land and everything else. So they used to be very, very important. And it's, like this. So now they're a little bit in decline. They will rise back up again, I'm sure. I don't know, what's it like in India?
It is like
Poetry based.
Really?
A mixed bag.
Mm.
Many popular books are in prose, many novels have been published recently, and poems are always, because in India there are many languages, literatures, officially 24 languages in Sahitya Akademi, and other languages. So this land is an ocean of language and literatures. No particular trend is reigning, but almost all trends, all types of ideas we inherit. There may be hundreds of poets here who are writing on Middle East crisis, Ukrainian crisis. So this is land where literature flourishes in all genres.
So good to hear.
Sahitya Akademi is doing the pioneering work in spreading literature from city to villages and households.
The reason I came to India, and just so you know, the reason I came to India is there is something called BRIBook, which is an international platform for children to write books. They have like AI tools that help them and get them to get the book, and they get a printed book, their own printed book at the end. And they have an award that they give out every year in India for the 100 best books. It's an international company, but the award is in India. For the 100 best books, they give you for the bestsellers and for jury selection. And the reason I came to India is they invited me to be in their event and give out awards and give a speech. And it was heartwarming to see so many young children committed to literature, writing their own stuff, proudly coming to you with a book that they wrote, that they hold in their hand, that they got into the school library, that they are selling. It was really amazing to see. It was really amazing and heartwarming to see that literature has such a flourishing future here in India. It was really nice to see. Wait, okay. No, it's okay. So I'll after, okay?
Myself, Dr. Rani Srivastava. I write in Hindi. Basically, I am a poet, but apart from it, I write short stories and criticism also.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know, in your country, poems are being written, whether women and pollution are the subject or not.
Women?
Women, feminism,
Yes,
women,
yes, very much.
atrocities on women, or positivity steps for women.
Very much so.
Yes, yes.
Very much so. Very much so. Hebrew poetry was always written in the modern era.
Poetry.
Always, women were very important writers, and they wrote about what they cared about. So sometimes they cared about politics, but a lot of the times they also cared about women issues. And really, like in the first generation of our poets, we have a poet called Rachel, who is really important and much beloved. And we have another poet in the next generation, Leah Goldberg, also very much beloved. So women poets are very much at the forefront of Israeli creation.
Yeah.
And they write a lot about feminism and about other issues that trouble them, about the physicality of the human body, of the female body, or about love, and about politics and other stuff which they care about. But it's not restricted to feminine issues, but it's also it's a very prominent issue.
Thank you.
Wait, because she was, sorry, yeah.
Myself, Dr. Rekha Vyas. I have written at least 20 books, 5, 6 centric on humor and satire, translated many Sanskrit classics like Vedas and many other granthas. My main query is how Hebrew was cultivated in people's heart and mind through elementary education or starting education or domestic level or what, because it was like a movement as we have heard in our own country. And what is translations, Indian literature translations position in your country?
Okay, so the second question, I'm not sure how to answer, because I don't have the information, I'm sorry. But the first question I can answer. And the story of the revival of the Hebrew language it has many faces, but I think the most important thing what happened was there was a lot of pressure from grassroots of the Zionists, of the new Jews that came to Israel, that they wanted to revive the Hebrew language, and they would put a lot of pressure on anybody who would try not to speak Hebrew, to speak Hebrew. There was even, it was called the language wars, when they opened the technical school in Haifa called the Technion. It's a very famous university to this day. And the teachers there said, we cannot teach technical subjects in Hebrew. It's too complicated, we will teach it in German. And students refused to show up to classes until they taught them in Hebrew, and they recreated the entire vocabulary. Two things that were very important. One was that Jews came from a lot of diaspora. So some spoke Yiddish at home, and others spoke German at home, and some spoke Arabic at home. So when they came together to Israel, they needed a common language. And the common language was Hebrew, always between Jews. That was not new. If a Jew from Yemen met a Jew from France, they would sit together, they would speak in Hebrew. In fact, there is a famous story about the founder of the modern Hebrew language, called Eliezer ben Yehuda, and he was recovering from pneumonia in Algiers. And in Algiers, he met this Jew, and they started speaking in Hebrew. Now, Hebrew, in tradition, two accents were developed. One was the European accent, and one was the Mediterranean or Middle Eastern accent. And when he spoke to that Algerian Jew, he said, we need to adopt the Mediterranean accent, and we speak all in the Mediterranean accent, a little badly, not as good as that Algerian probably spoke, but that was a decision made by a European who met a Middle Eastern person, and they spoke together in Hebrew. And the second thing is the role of poetry and literature, not in creating high and mighty works, but Hebrew was created in kindergarten, where they would write all the kindergarten songs were in Hebrew. All the holiday songs that were used to be sang in the languages of the different diaspora, translated to Hebrew, sang in Hebrew. So, and Bialik was the national poet of Israel, the poet laureate, a lot of his work went into writing these nursery rhymes. And he would get a letter from a kindergarten teacher. We have a holiday for this and that. Can you write us a song for that? And he would write these songs. So I think that's a very important. It comes from the ground up, and when the children speak it, the parents will speak it. They don't have a choice.
So what is the employment situation? Because people who came from foreign, they tell you who are learning their own country's languages only, they are not getting proper employments and all.
In Israel, we start learning English at a fairly early age. Second grade, you start learning English. So that's the standard in Israel. So most Israelis speak decent English at least. I went out of Israel and I went to a British school in Rome. It's a whole story, which is why my English is better than most Israelis. But most Israelis would be able to speak at least decent English. Well educated, even the not so well educated ones can communicate. I think in India it's the same, no? It's like I spoke to many people, they speak decent English. It's not Oxford, but it's okay.
So if possible, whenever you like, you would like to listen your own creative work.
In Hebrew?
Maybe something you
Yeah,
can translate.
Yes. Let him ask one question.
Sure.
Then you can.
So, Mr. Ohad, shalom.
Hi.
Welcome to
Thank you.
India. My question is, and I'm Sharad Mohan, US American, Indian, from Bihar, Patna. And my question to you, sir, is literature, Hebrew literature, is a unifier, or does it create passion, emotion among the people in this very stressful time? Or is it the few thinkers who want to drive the passion of the nation by their strong literary thinking, which may be imaginary, which may not be imaginary? So, how do we see the Hebrew literature?
It's a very good question. As you may know or not know, Israel has some tensions in it. And literature, actually, it depends on the writer. Some writers want to inflame the passions of, because they believe in what they believe, and they think that everybody should do it their way and not any other way. And there was actually a novel published maybe a year ago, which is a direct attack on a certain person, on another writer, by the way. I'm not going to name names. It's also not a very good book, so let's drop it. But it was like that was the whole PR of the book was this. There are other writers who seek to heal, who seek to mend fences, who seek to find the more common, because writers are people, and they have their own passions and they have their own agendas, and some of them want this and the others want that. It's a force in the field. In the cultural field is a force in the political field, and the political field is the force in the cultural field. But it's not the end all be all of literary creation.
So, any more questions?
Any question?
Yeah, please.
Namaste. I maintain a blog.
Can you introduce yourself, please, sir?
In view of recent crisis in Israel, whether the literature has been changed or turned from psychological or family background to political and war background. And another question, in view of cultural exchange, how many Hebrew literature has been translated in Indian languages and how many Indian literature has been translated in Hebrew language?
So for the second part of the question, again, I apologize, but I don't have the numbers and I don't want to just say because I don't know. For the first part of the question, listen, literature is as wide as the world. And so, because the world has both politic and personal, family and relationship, love and hate and everything in between. Same with literature. And that didn't change, I think. It's the same breadth of human experience that has always been around us. So I think in that sense, it's very... There is one thing I really like about literature, not only Hebrew literature, but literature as a cultural global phenomena, is the globality of it. I can read a poet written by some of you guys in Hindi, if it's translated I can read it, and it will sort of harp on the strings of my soul, the same as something that was written in Hebrew. You know, it's the universality of the human experience. So, you know, in that sense, I don't think it changed, and I think there's always room for everybody. Maybe Dr. Rao, you know about the number of books translated? And
Not much has been done. As far as the literature exchange is concerned, only writers, sometimes from India they have gone to Israel and from there. That is also very few delegations have gone. But literature also not much translated, except some Tagore or our epics into Hebrew language, and also from there to our languages. Not widely.
Are translated
Very
by Sambal Prakashani, Hindi, Yehuda Amichai's poems and other Israeli poems have been translated in Hindi, and in English also translated entire works of Yehuda Amichai.
yes.
And one book is in many houses, and millions of original Bible was written in Hebrew. Hindi and English version.
That's true. That is true. But
millions copies.
this is not in the Hebrew Writers Association. A writer of the Bible is not in the association.
But Yehuda Amichai
Yehuda Amichai, yes.
Books are available. I have read entire work
Yeah.
of Yehuda Amichai, approximately 1,000 poems
Yes.
available in Hindi and English.
It's a very good point.
Sir, this is the Dr. Suresh. My question is, we say in Sanskrit that Gadyam Kavina Miksha Madanti, which means prose writing is like a touchstone that sharpens the writings of a poet. So like that, we have a storytelling tradition in Sanskrit, right from ancient days onwards. Like Panchatantra, we have he is the first and foremost writer by name Vishnu Sharma, who wrote Panchatantra. Like that, do you have, just now you said that prose writing is a very prominent one, prominent genre as such. So like that, like Panchatantra, do you have something like a story telling or narration style in Hebrew language as it is there in Sanskrit?
Yes, no. Sadly no. Because Hebrew was not a very live language for many years. So the oral traditions were lost. We do have our own particular written forms. There are poems, like prayers, old prayers, that are written like the first letter of the alphabet for each line begins with a letter of the alphabet in order. We sing that every Saturday sometimes. It's called the blessing of the wife. And we have some sort of these traditions that are left, but because the language died and went away and then came back, the wonderful oral tradition of storytelling, we lost that one. And it's really sad. It's really, really sad because I think looking from the outside, I think one of the things that keeps Indian poetry so alive and so strong, like you said, is this tradition that we don't have. So it's sad, but that's the way it is.
I think almost all they have asked some questions and they have already interacted.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say something?
Just a small thing.
Yeah, please.
I know a lot of you were asking about numbers of books that were translated into Hebrew and then, or even sold. So I did a very small research lately. I arrived to India 9 months ago and I was thinking about it. Because I know in Israel people are very passionate about India. And me personally, I know about 15 books that were written or by Indians or it's about India by Israeli authors. It's a big subject here. I don't know if you're aware, but yeah, it's a big thing. It started in 1957. There was a scholar called Azriel Karlibach. He came to India, 57. He came for a month, and he wrote a book about his visit. Just a month it was. And he called it India, the Journey. If it's not translated into English and sold here, it's a big shame and I will change it. It's written like poetry. It's not like today's writing, like I went from here to here. He dived into the culture, he was curious, it was before internet. If you didn't come to India, you didn't know what's going on. And he, actually, I think he was the pioneer bringing India into Israel. And people were starting to be very curious. And then the 70s, the hippie trail, people were coming from Europe and Israel too, starting to explore India. And then another wave of books were written, also by Israelis that visited India. And also we started to acknowledge that you have such a rich culture. I personally know many, many books that are Indian. Listen, but it's also no secret, the best sellers that sell all around the world, they sell also in Israel. And we now, our star author, you probably heard about him, it's not prose, it's Noah Harari. I don't know if you know the name. Anybody heard about him? Noah Harari. He writes books about history. And Noah Harari. He's a big thing now all over the world. And everywhere I go...
Sapiens. Sapiens is the big book. Yeah.
Yeah. He wrote already 3 books about history and now he wrote about the future. Yeah. He is world famous now, and everywhere I go as Israeli attaché, people are asking me, you have to bring him, you have to bring him. He's the number one. I also know that books, Israeli books about secret operating, army-style things, also very much selling here, but also prose. So things are happening. I think not enough. One of my reasons to come here is to promote and maybe try to do more ping-pong with that, and hopefully I will. If you have any ideas of a book, Indian book, that you think could be interesting for the outsiders, our little country, I would love to hear from you. I'll give you my number.
Hundreds of books.
Let's go.
In India.
That's my job. Okay, and then you have to...
Very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we had a very vibrant interaction with the visiting guest, Mr. Ohad Ouziel. And also thanks to special cultural officer from Israel Embassy. And also thank every one of you who took part in this interactive session with visiting writer. Thank you so much and good night. And we have arranged some tea also. Thank you.